Hello there! Today I'm starting a series of tutorials. My goal is to train my teammates in order to explore and understand some essential concepts of the technologies that we'll be using for our project of software laboratory. Let's get started with the front-end stuff, okay? It is a part that I'm very excited to share with you. What will be the front-end framework that we will use? We are going to use the framework of Vue.js. But before looking at Vue.js, let's see what is Node.js. First up, Node.js is a powerful open-source JavaScript runtime environment that allows you to run JavaScript code on the server side. So the first thing we have to do is to download the most recent version of Node.js when you are in this page. Okay, what page is that? This page. Okay, you have to choose the recommended version. Do not download the current version with the latest features. Why? Because it's the most recent version and it still has untested features and it's not stable enough. Once you have Node.js installed, you can proceed to create a new Vue.js project. So we open VS Code. Okay, we open VS Code. In this case, I have already my project, but just for you to know, if you're just about to start the project, we open a new terminal and we go to the folder where we want to store our new Vue.js project, and we run this prompt. You usually, at least up to date, that is December of the year 2023, you do a npm create view at latest. You do this command. I'm not going to run it because I don't need to. I don't want to show you the configuration of the project because that's something you go check in the official Vue.js quick start page on the internet. I will leave the link in the description. Okay, Vue.js is a progressive JavaScript framework used for building user interfaces, and it's known for its simplicity and flexibility. Let me show you how it looks like a real project that I'm working on right now. The general folder structure on a project in Vue.js is, okay, you have here the assets, the router, and the services, and the views. Generally, once you create the project, you won't have immediately the folders neither for the views nor for the router. Those you will have to make them yourself. What are assets? Okay, let's see assets. An example of an asset is an image. Those are, let's say, components which we don't need to use a version control on. They are constants. Okay, what are components? Okay, let's go to components. They are your reusable components, like for example your navbar or your footer, or in this case some let's say cards that are going to appear, that are going to be displayed for an error or for a success message, or even the spinner of the loading spinner. That can be a component because it's something. It's like a component. It's something that you're going to be using once and over again, and you don't want to program that from scratch each single time. You can simply import something that you have already done. Okay, what are the views? Those are the pages of your website. Their extension is point view. For example, here in views, okay, let's see, I know, like the check-in.view. This is a page for a airline company for selling tickets. So okay, the .view extension is not a language, as you can see, but rather a compendium of 3 different languages. What are those languages? It's HTML, that is between these 2 tags, the labels of template. We have also the style within these labels of style, that is your CSS code. And last but not least, you have your script with the label script, that is all your JavaScript code. The order of these 3 languages don't really matter, but I personally like to have my HTML first, then my CSS, and then my script. So the HTML is like the structure, let's say the physical structure of the page, The CSS are the styles of how I want the page to look like, and the script is all the programming, is all the behavior that I want to incorporate into the page. Okay, so these three characteristics, these three features need each other in order to make a single page work in a project. Okay, what are services? Okay, if we go in here, okay, let's say the authentication, and it's a cliche but it works. They are JavaScript code files. They are very short, and their only work is to do the magic of passing the information to the backend. So you have a service, and each service communicates with a backend's endpoint. In this case, we have the authenticate endpoint. So we simply pass these values that we are going to collect in a form to this direction using some special libraries for that. But it's just like it makes the connection of responsibilities to the backend in a RESTful application, and that's what I'm working on currently. What is the router? Okay, let's see this router. Oh, it's only the index.js actually. Okay, the router is where the index is. The index tells me what routes I have in my project. But what are routes? Well, fundamentally in the internet, all URLs are routes. For example, here we can see this route. This is a route. And if I press any button, I will get redirected to another page. Yes, if I change some extension here, I will be redirected to another page. That's another route. And it is exactly the same thing for the endpoints. As you can see here, an endpoint is nothing but a route on the internet. So in a page you have the /login, /purchase, / anything that depends on the structure that you want and on how you are building your project, what is the engineering behind your project, but it's up to you. These are simply the extensions. All what is happening right here, for example, here in this page, it's only the language extension for English, and that's a route that must be here in the index file of the frontend for that page. Okay, as I already said, it is exactly the same thing for the endpoints. An endpoint is nothing but a route on the internet. The frontend, through its services, what it does is either listening or speaking to some endpoints in the backend. That's what we call APIs. So here the router does the following. Okay, if the client is in the default route / it will send them to the login components. Well, in this case it's a home component, and so on. In this lower part of here, what we do is setting up the security and history management of the routes. For example, what we do here is like before each transition, it requires some authentication token. That depends more on the structure of the overall RESTful application that you are building, but that's something, these security parameters is something that you can define here in the index.js file. Okay, going back to the views, I have already explained what is like the structure of these three languages working together. And this is the reason why many people are afraid of starting off with any JavaScript framework, because they see all this code and different languages working together in the same file, and they get intimidated by the apparent complexity of the project. But I am here to tell you that there is nothing to be afraid of. Indeed, it's quite intuitive to learn and use. The templates look big and scary, but it's normal that they look big. They are very dummy. I mean, they are HTML code, and HTML code will always be big, having all those tags and divs. I will do my review with the register page. Okay, so I go to the register page. That's the sign up page. Okay. So we have our template. In this case, it's just the template. In this case, it's just a form with a lot of options for the sign up. Yes. In this case, it's just a form with the different fields and buttons, and in this case it's just a form for the different fields and buttons. The buttons are specified by the @ sign. The most important thing here is that you establish a connection between the script down here, the script that is down here, and the variables in the template up here. Okay, so you have here your script, and we have to connect this to the variables that we are using in the template. How do we do that? Easy, with tags. Let's say that, for example, in each input, what I'm saying is like, okay, I have this vModel equal first name, and this first name, where is that? Where that means that in the script, in the data of the script, I have a first name that is connected to the template. In the script, you have 4 things. First, you have the imports, then you have the components, if you have some, the data, and the methods. Well, so in this example, we have the error modal as component. I have this data. These are variables that need to be initialized once you start or open a page. In this case, I have to initialize these fields. Why? Well, because I need to reference them in the template. Here you can see that I use the vModel to reference the variable I have down here in the data. Example here, I have a vModel for last name. So what's up with the methods? It's just a space where you can write all the methods that you may need. Here, methods, okay? For example, here in this signup method, okay, let's look for the signup method. Okay, so in this create account method, we can create either functions or local variables. In this case, I'm just creating these local variables using const, okay, these local variables, and then I do the instantiation with the data I defined above. That's why we put this here. For example, here in this method, with const, we can create either functions or local variables. In this case, I'm just creating these local variables here, these local variables, and then I do the instantiation with the data I defined above. That means this equal this. That's referencing the data. We just tell you do whatever operation you want, but in this case we just call the service. So we call the service, we pass it these variables, and then we wait for the service to respond. We act according to the response we get from it. If the response is the successful number, the successful number is always 200, then we do this, else we do this, else we do this, depending on what response we are getting. As you can see, the frontend is very dummy. He doesn't know and does not care what is happening with the information. Its role is to be pretty and responding with a nice behavior to the backend request. Going back to the service, you can see that I want to show you that for any service we use Axios. What is Axios? Axios is a popular JavaScript library used for making HTTP requests from your Vue.js application. It simplifies the process of sending and receiving data from a server or an API. Here we define the function using const. This function is the one we imported in the Vue. Here we define the function using const, okay, const register, okay. This function is the one we imported that we're going to import in the Vue, in the respective Vue. We write the props, the function parameters. And what do I do with these props? Well, I create a JSON file using braces. I put the data there, and then we say, Axios, please post this. And we specify the endpoint here. And we specify the endpoint and the variables, the credentials. That's basically the JSON file that we are defining here. In the internet, there are plenty of request types for HTTP communication, but the most famous are the POST and the GET. With GET, you want to fetch information from the endpoint. With POST, you want to send information to the endpoint and then have a response as well. In this case, at this stage of the project, I'm working on my local host, both for the frontend and the backend. But then, when this gets deployed on the internet, I'll change this endpoint's address for the address of where my backend will be. In JavaScript, the export of a function or the export of a component or whatever means that the current component can be called, that it can be accessed by other files in the project. It allows you to import that component later on. Before running this project, I want to talk to you about the main. Okay, the main. In Vue.js, the main.js file is composed of a lot of system library imports. We import the CSS styles. We import Bootstrap. If you are using Bootstrap, you can import it right here. You can import the router function. So, how is the order to start the application? If we read it in human language, it will be something like, okay, create the application, use the router, and mount the application in app.vue. The application.vue is this. Is kind of the main, but in visual terms. This is the first thing that gets mounted on the browser once you enter the application. Here we have a template that simply transfers the rendering responsibility to the router. Traditionally, when you had a front-end application, if a user opened a page, the application had to load the different resources from the front-end server somewhere in the world. That's to say, the different assets and components. But if we use router navigation, the application only fetches from the front-end server once, at the moment when the user first enters the application. That's why nowadays when you enter a website, it often takes a while to start, but afterwards the page loading is really fast, because once you enter the website, your browser fetches all the front-end application at once. This way your front-end server gets available for doing other stuff like dealing with concurrency. So, okay, now we're going to start this project. We use this command, and voila, it says that I can open this URL. In this case, this is my local host and this particular logic port. With control click, and voila, it says that I can open this URL. Okay, this is my current page. I consider it important to clarify to the people who are not initiated in the communications field that a computer doesn't have only physical ports like the ones for the USB drivers or HDMI or UTP cables. A computer has thousands of logical ports, because every communication that you establish on the internet gets a different port. If you have 10 tabs open at Google Chrome, that means that at least you have 10 different conversations with the global network or with the network in general, and each conversation must be established with a port. This port I was assigned here is pretty common for the web development, because the first usually the first 4,000 ports are usually busy with other important stuff. Okay, so going back to the application, here we have my reusable navbar component. We have a lot of forms made in the views. I have this form for logging in. I'm not going to do the process of authenticating myself here, because for that I will have to start the backend, and that's not the goal of this video. What I want you to know in actually is really like, you can do a right click and inspect, or maybe in some computers the F12 key works too, and that here it's very important that in console you can do a debug with a lot of prints messages just for checking out what's happening with your application. That's the console of the browser. In network, you can understand what components or what assets or what services are being called and in the case of services, what services are successful and what services are not, and understanding why, if they are not successful, what happened in the process. You can also have access to the memory or our application, to the local storage and to the session storage. That might be very useful depending on the needs of your application. And you can add another dev tools depending on the framework that you are using. In this case, I would recommend the dev tools for Vue.js. That's an extension of Chrome, but that also works in other browsers like in Brave. Okay. And I'm glad to say that that's everything for today. I see you next time for the next adventure in the world of knowledge. Same place, same time, and goodbye.